Karen kept parking on my lake cabin property like it was her personal driveway. No permission, no apology, just full-on entitlement. So I did her a favor, welded her car doors shut, left a note that said, "Private property means private," and headed off for a 7-day vacation. When I got back, the car was still there, but Karen's attitude that had disappeared. I bought the cabin nearly 10 years ago. Not for the views, not for the investment potential, and certainly not because I needed a weekend status symbol. I bought it because it was mine, because the stillness of a lake, the hush of the pines, and the absence of traffic noise made it feel like the one place I could exhale without checking a clock. The place had no fancy history, no glamour, just good bones, a hand-built dock, and a dirt driveway that curved down like a secret trail to peace. Every Friday, I could get away from the city. I'd drive out, cooler in the back seat, book in the glove box, and silence in my lungs. The cabin itself was set just off the main lake access road. Technically a public road, but maintained by the homeowners association that sprung up in the newer development uphill. I wasn't a part of the HOA. My cabin predated it by decades. It sat on deeded land that had been grandfathered in before zoning maps got tangled in the alphabet soup of suburban lakeside community overlays. In short, I didn't know the HOA anything. Not dues, not explanations. They maintained their stretch of the road. And for a while, things were quiet. That was before Karen. Every HOA has one. Ours was platinum grade. Karen lived in one of the newer A-frame builds perched above the lake like a judgmental owl. Always watching, always reporting, always assuming her clipboard gave her more power than the county sheriff. She'd wave occasionally when I drove past her driveway, but the wave always looked like it came with a price tag. We didn't speak much. She had her community potlucks. I had my tackle box and firewood. It was a peaceful mutual disinterest. Until one morning, I came up to the cabin and saw her car, a shiny, overwaxed SUV, parked halfway across my gravel driveway. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I looked around. No people. I figured maybe she had visitors and someone accidentally overshot the edge of the shoulder. So I gently reversed, maneuvered around, and carried on with my weekend. Didn't think much of it, until it happened again, and again. Each time, it was just a little more assertive. One time, her rear bumper was barely a foot from the front steps of my porch. Another time, the driver's side mirror was still warm, like she had just stepped out of the car and vanished into the woods. So I did the civil thing. I left a note. "Hey, this is private property. Please don't park in the driveway. Thanks." No response. The next week, it happened again. So I knocked on her door. She opened it with that tight smile people use when they're trying to look polite while clearly annoyed. I explained, respectfully, that her vehicle was making it hard for me to access my own cabin. She blinked, then said, "Oh, I assumed you were only here on weekends. I just needed a place for a visitor to park while we had the HOA committee over." I nodded but clarified again it was still private property, not overflow parking. She smiled tighter. "Right, I get it. Just thought we were all neighbors here." Then she shut the door. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But of course it wasn't. By the 5th time it happened, she'd stopped pretending it was temporary. She just parked there, sometimes for full days. No note. No apology. One time I caught her dropping off groceries, and she just waved casually like she was doing me a favor. "Only for an hour," she called, before disappearing behind the cabin line. I checked my phone. It stayed there for 6. Now, I wasn't trying to be confrontational. This cabin wasn't a fortress. It was my sanctuary. I didn't want to fill it with arguments and passive-aggressive showdowns. But I also wasn't about to let someone rewrite property lines just because they owned a Sharpie and a clipboard. So I decided to give it one more try, the firm but friendly route. I wrote a letter, typed, signed, folded, delivered in her mailbox. "Karen, this is a formal request to stop parking on or across my driveway at the cabin. The space is private property, not HOA managed, and continued use without permission constitutes trespassing. I'd appreciate your cooperation." No reply. The next Friday, I drove up and found 2 of her cars parked across the drive. One in front, one backed in, like they were bracketing my cabin with chrome bookends. That was the moment it shifted. That was when I knew this wasn't about inconvenience. It was about control. Karen didn't just park her car there to save space. She parked it because she thought she could, because she thought I wouldn't fight back, because she thought her little HOA rules gave her more power than my own deed. That's when the frustration settled into something sharper. I didn't raise my voice, didn't call the cops, didn't argue with her or anyone else. Instead, I went home that weekend and made a call to a friend of mine who works in mobile welding and heavy-duty fabrication. The next trip up, I'd be bringing more than fishing gear. I'd be bringing a plan. I don't know if Karen was emboldened by my politeness or just saw it as weakness, but once she realized I wasn't going to make a scene, her behavior went from annoying to intrusive. The next time I showed up at the cabin, her SUV wasn't just partially on my gravel. It was parked dead center across my access, like she was daring me to say something. And she wasn't in sight. I honked, waited, no answer. I walked up the road to her place, knocked. A teenager, probably her daughter, answered and said, "She's at brunch in town." I said, "Well, she's blocking my driveway." The girl shrugged and closed the door. It sat there until almost 5 p.m. I couldn't even unload my gear without parking on the shoulder. That night, I left another printed letter. Not a post-it, not a handwritten warning. A typed, signed, time-stamped letter. "This is your second formal notice. My property is not HOA land. Your vehicle is blocking private access. Next time, I will escalate this through the sheriff's department. I've documented the incident." No response. Again. But by then, I noticed something strange. Over the next 2 weeks, neighbors started acting differently. One waved, but then quickly looked away. Another woman I usually exchange hellos with suddenly avoided eye contact. Eventually, I heard it. From the porch of one of the nearby properties, Karen was chatting with 2 people while pointing at my cabin. I didn't hear the whole thing, but I caught a choice phrase. Technically, that driveway isn't really private. It's part of the original community access strip. He just thinks he owns it. I stood there, holding a bag of charcoal, frozen in disbelief. It was bold. It was a lie, and it was spreading. I went inside, pulled out my deed copy, and stared at the map. No ambiguity. No shared easement. That driveway, that lot, that cabin, all mine. But Karen was playing a different game. One not built on facts, but narrative. She didn't need to be right. She just needed enough people to assume she was. The following Friday, I was planning to bring up a friend from the city. First time he'd ever been to the cabin. I left work early, packed snacks, gear, and a cooler, and we hit the road laughing, excited for a quiet weekend. We arrived at 6:10 p.m. Karen's car was already there. This time, fully parked across the entry. Not angled, not slipping in, blocking, with the rear bumper just inches from my gate. My friend raised an eyebrow. "Is this normal?" I clenched my jaw. Yeah, for her. We parked 100 yards back and hauled our stuff down on foot. Halfway through, Karen strolled past us with her sunglasses on and a yoga mat in her arm. Didn't even flinch. Didn't acknowledge the car. Didn't say a word. Just walked past like she hadn't taken over my property, like it was a valet lot. That night, I opened a beer, looked at my friend, and said, "You know, I've got a buddy who does welding." He grinned. Say the word. Saturday morning, Karen's SUV was still there. Sunday morning, too. We ended up carrying everything back out over 2 trips, climbing around her vehicle just to get to my own. By then, I knew what she was doing. It wasn't carelessness. It was posturing. She wanted to prove she had some imagined authority, or at least that I didn't. And what made it worse? She threatened me. Midweek, I received a printed note on my front door in the city. Not a city notice. An HOA letter, and signed with the HOA letterhead in Comic Sans. It read, "Your recent guest activities and parking complaints have been noted. Please be reminded that all driveways are subject to review under the Community Access and Noise Ordinance Protocols. Further action may be taken if violations continue." I stared at it for a full minute. Guest activities? My driveway? Their ordinance? It was laughable, but dangerous, because she was turning her delusion into paperwork. I emailed the county clerk that day to request an official property line verification and updated title report. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed every document ready. Because if she thought she was about to bluff her way into controlling my cabin, she was about to hit a wall. A welded, steel-plated wall. And I already had a plan. I made the call to my buddy, scheduled the time, packed my things for a week-long trip, and I made sure that the next Friday was going to be the last time she ever blocked my driveway. Sometimes, the most effective moves aren't loud. They're slow, precise, documented. The kind that don't require yelling, just a witness, a timestamp, and a lock. The next Thursday night, I didn't go straight to the cabin. I picked up my friend, the mobile welder, and we parked down the road. I already knew what we'd find. Sure enough, Karen's SUV was sitting there, like a smug lawn ornament sprawled across my driveway again. Rear tires crooked, nose slightly dipped into the grass line. Only this time, I was ready. First, I took pictures, then a video showing the vehicle, the license plate, the location on my parcel, and the long history of notes and letters. I zoomed in on the "No Trespassing" sign posted next to the gate. I scanned the coordinates on my GPS, the driveway sitting firmly within my boundary line, according to the county's GIS data. Then I opened the folder. Inside were a notarized copy of my deed, a dated property survey, 2 signed letters I had sent to Karen, 1 copy of the ridiculous HOA violation letter, and last but not least, a printed sign I had laminated earlier that day. Black text, bold font, clear as law. We worked quickly. My friend didn't damage a single panel, didn't torch a thing. He used a portable MIG rig with a grounding clamp, working around the rubber and glass like a surgeon with a welder's wand. Each door seam was fused shut, a light tack weld on every latch. The kind that wouldn't harm the frame or the engine, but would definitely make opening a door impossible without heavy tools. Trunk sealed. Rear doors sealed. Driver's side especially sealed. Karen wanted to claim authority? Fine. She could stay exactly where she parked it. When we were done, I placed the sign squarely on the windshield. Private property violation. Vehicle immobilized. Do not tow. Do not tamper. Owner will return in 7 days. Ranch owner. I slid a waterproof sleeve over it, just in case it rained. Then I locked my cabin, dropped my phone in a drawer, and drove to the opposite side of the state, to a secluded fishing spot with no signal, no noise, and no possibility of being interrupted. The moment I cast my line into the lake that next morning, I felt it, the kind of peace that only comes when you've handled a problem so thoroughly, there's nothing left to check. I knew what would happen. Day 1, Karen would come by and see her car sealed. She'd probably panic, then try the passenger door, then the rear door, then the trunk. Nothing would budge. Day 2, she'd likely call a locksmith, but they'd find the tack welds, clean, uniform, cold-hardened steel. Day 3, she'd call the police. They'd show up, look at the property line records, see the posted notices, and shrug. Not vandalism, not damage to a vehicle, just a very secure reminder that trespassing has consequences. And if she tried to get it towed, well, the sign covered that. Tampering with a posted notice on private property? That's on her. She wanted drama. She wanted authority. Instead, she got silence. Silence, and a week to think about it. I spent those 7 days off the grid. Fishing, sleeping, cooking over fire. Not a single text. Not one voicemail. The world kept turning, but not on Karen's schedule. When I pulled back into the driveway the next Friday, her SUV was still there. And so were 4 neon notices taped all over it. HOA citations probably meant for me. It looked like she had tried to reverse the roles. Only problem? You can't cite someone when your vehicle's the one breaking the law. I smiled, set my gear down, pulled out my cordless grinder, and snipped every weld off in 15 minutes flat. Didn't even scratch the paint. Didn't leave a mark. The doors opened just fine. Then I left one final envelope on her driver's seat. Inside, a printed copy of my title deed. A bill for trespassing usage of private property, calculated per day. And a note. You parked here. I simply kept it safe for you. I never heard a word from her after that. Not a knock. Not a note. Not even a passive-aggressive wave. Karen learned what HOA guidelines couldn't teach her. That when you assume everyone is too polite to stand their ground, you eventually meet someone who knows exactly how to seal the door shut and take a vacation. Karen didn't think it through. That became clear the moment she came outside and saw her SUV sealed like a tomb on my gravel drive. She tried the handle. Nothing. Try the passenger side. Still nothing. Then the back. Rattled harder. Nothing again. Her voice cracked. She tried to stay calm, but you could hear the edge of panic slipping in like a leak in a sinking boat. By the time she got her phone out, she was red in the face. And that's when the real show began. She called a locksmith first. The guy showed up about an hour later, stepped out of his van with a leather pouch and a confident smirk. 5 minutes later, he was shaking his head, motioning her over, and pointing at the seams. You could almost hear him say, "These aren't locks. These are welds." She screamed something unintelligible, probably about vandalism or illegal restraint, and he got back in the van. Didn't even invoice her. Next came the tow truck. She must have called a local operator, hoping they could yank the car free or drag it down the road. But when the driver showed up, took one look at the vehicle, and read the laminated sign on the windshield, he didn't even bother unspooling the chains. "No key?" he asked. She barked something about not needing a key, just move it. He shook his head and pointed to the words, "Private property, do not tamper." "Ma'am, this is a legal boundary. You touch that vehicle on his land, we're liable. I'm not getting sued over your parking drama." He left without touching a thing. That's when neighbors started filming. She hadn't realized she had an audience, but several homeowners had already gathered across the street. Some sipping coffee, one with a phone up, 2 others whispering behind a hedge. Word had spread fast. The woman who'd spent the last year writing up citations for mailboxes out of code and holiday decorations past the deadline was now pacing, sweating, and slapping her own car door on someone else's property, helpless and exposed. Apparently, one neighbor even live-streamed it. Karen didn't notice until someone shouted from the sidewalk, "Hey, Karen, can we park there too? Looks roomy." A ripple of laughter followed, just enough to crack her composure. She turned, pointed, yelled something about calling the police again. But by then, people weren't afraid of her anymore. They were tired of her. And the worst part? The HOA board was watching too. That evening, an emergency meeting was held in one of the members' garages. Karen tried to spin it, claimed she thought the driveway was shared use, that she'd been trying to protect the neighborhood from an abandoned structure. But none of it held, especially not when the photos were passed around. Not the ones from the cabin owner. The ones from neighbors, showing her parked there for hours on end, blocking deliveries, ignoring posted signs, waving off requests like it was her land. One board member, a retired lawyer, apparently said it best. "You claimed property oversight on a parcel outside HOA jurisdiction, ignored private land notices, then triggered a police visit with a false complaint. That's not enforcement. That's a liability." She went pale. No defense. No policy to fall back on. No made-up ordinance to twist. Just silence and the slow realization that her little empire had collapsed in full view. And when I returned, 7 days later, sunburnt, relaxed, carrying a small cooler of smoked trout, I turned onto the road leading to the cabin and found people clapping. Not many, just a small group of neighbors. 2 men on lawn chairs, one older woman holding a phone. They didn't say anything loud. No signs. No banners. Just a quiet round of applause as I pulled up to my own gate and unlocked it like the rightful owner I always was. Karen didn't come outside. She didn't even peek through the blinds. But her car? It was gone. No note. No epalegi. Just silence. Finally. Later that week, I heard from a neighbor that the board had reassigned her from all property enforcement duties. No more citations. No more HOA bulletins signed President Karen. She was just another resident now. No louder, no more powerful than anyone else on the street. Funny how quickly the volume drops when a microphone's taken away. As for me, I got a small box in the mail the following week. Inside was a thank you note, anonymous. Tucked inside, a single car-shaped keychain, welded shut. Some victories are loud. Mean it stayed quiet, the kind that echoes every time someone looks at my driveway and thinks twice. After I got back from my fishing trip, life at the lake cabin settled into something better than peace, order. The kind of order that doesn't come from arguing or escalating, but from drawing the line once and letting it hold. No more tire tracks cutting across the gravel. No more HOA notes stuffed into my mailbox. No more surprise cars sitting where livestock once walked or deliveries once rolled in. Karen? She went silent, not just in voice, but in presence. No more flyers. No more emails signed with HOA president. A few neighbors told me she resigned officially. Health reasons, they said. Others claimed she was voted out quietly at the next board session. Doesn't really matter. What mattered is that the neighborhood finally saw what she was. Not a leader, not a protector of community values, but someone playing sheriff in a town she didn't own. One afternoon, I found a flyer on my door. This time, it wasn't from her. It was from a new HOA secretary. We're reviewing new policies around property boundary respect, enforcement limitations, and board accountability. It asked for feedback from all residents, even those like me, whose property technically wasn't under HOA control, but still bordered the neighborhood. A polite gesture. A smart one. So I showed up, sat in the back row, didn't speak unless asked. But when I did, you could hear a pin drop. A week later, the HOA published a new policy book. Tighter restrictions on who could issue notices. A new appeals process for property owners. A clause clearly stating, no enforcement actions may be initiated against non-HOA parcels under any circumstance. About time. As for me, I added one more sign near the gate. Small, handmade, welded to a post. It reads, private driveway, not a parking spot, not a statement, just mine. Some folks chuckle when they see it. Others nod. A few still slowed down to look at the gravel, like they're remembering the week Karen's SUV sat there, quiet, locked up with a sign that said, see you in 7 days. And just like that, the story became legend. The welder's visit, the sealed doors, the sign, the vacation, and the quiet comeback that didn't need volume. Just patience, proof, and the willingness to walk away for a week and let the truth weld itself shut. If someone keeps crossing your line, don't waste your breath trying to teach them where the boundary is. Show them. Some people, like Karen, think power comes from paper, citations, warnings, threats with no teeth. But real power? It comes from knowing your rights, keeping receipts, and acting so cleanly that even the loudest voice runs out of things to say. I didn't slam a door. I welded hers shut. I didn't argue. I went fishing. And when I came back, the neighborhood had changed. Not because I fought harder, but because I let the facts do the talking. Because sometimes, when someone parts themselves in your peace, the best response isn't revenge. It's returning to silence that they can't disrupt anymore. So if you're dealing with a Karen who thinks your land is theirs to manage, your driveway is their overflow lot, or your patience is a parking permit, don't raise your voice. Raise your standards. Protect what's yours. Document what's right, and when necessary, leave just long enough for the lesson to set in. Because in the end, the quietest victory is the one they can't back out of.